Good evening, brothers and sisters in the Dhamma. It's a wonderful occasion to be back again. And today's topic, understanding and taming emotions. Basically, we're going to look at emotions and also have a basic understanding of how the Buddha described emotions. And we're going to use this from a scientific perspective to explore what is emotion, how it is aroused, and what we can do about it, how to tame emotions. So today we're going to explore the Buddha's teaching from a scientific perspective. We'll take a basic look at what is mind, what is brain, what is emotions, and how emotions are aroused. Then taking a look at our unconscious reactions to emotional excitements that lead to stress, suffering, anxiety, insecurity, and so on. And how we can tame our emotions and finally cultivate wellness and peace of mind so that we can have a more peaceful and happier life. We begin by taking a look at how the Buddha described the mind. The word mind is it's a very ambiguous word. When I say mind, what is mind? If you ask 10 different people, you might get 10 different answers, and you may even get some pretty confused ones too. But the Buddha was very specific. He described the mind as a mental experience, because the mind is not something that exists. It is not an entity. It is an experience. So he described it as 3 parts of mental experience. He used 3 words, 3 Pali words, or rather it was translated as 3 Pali words. The first is vijnana. Vijnana actually is often translated as consciousness, but the more precise translation, according to my teacher, Venerable Dr. Punaji, is perception, because it arises with the Panchakanda. It is basically the result of the process of perception. And this is really what has been perceived through our sense organs, because we are equipped with sense organs, we are equipped with the brain and so on. So the part of the sense organ that picks up the stimulations from the environment, like light entering the eye, sounds entering the ear, and taste, smell, touch, and so on. So these are being picked up by the sense organs and being processed. So this process is resulting in the process of perception called vijnana. And we basically a more accurate scientific term to describe vijnana is perception, not really consciousness. In fact, consciousness is what all these 3 parts of mental experience is. Consciousness is the combination of all 3 parts of mental experience. So vijnana is just one of the 3 parts. The second word that the Buddha used to describe the mind is mano. Mano basically is the cognitive process, the thinking process of the mind. Yeah, it is the activity of the part of the brain that is doing the thinking, the cerebral cortex. I'm going to show you later on how the correlation between these mental experiences and the actual brain structure as we know it today according to today's science. Basically, mano is the cognitive process where we categorize and interpret what we see, what we hear, smell, taste, or touch. In other words, what the sense experience tells us, we interpret it and categorize it. Everything is interpreted, because nothing is absolute as it is. It is all an interpretation. So when we see an object, seeing the object that is being seen is often referred to as rupa. And the mind begins to interpret what it is and give it a name, give it a label. And the label being given is nama. So that's how nama, rupa comes about. Seeing the object that is being seen is rupa. Interpreting it and giving it a label or a name, that is nama. So we have nama rupa coming from this part of the mind, the cognitive process, or we could call it the intellect of the mind, the rational part of the mind. Then there is a third word that the Buddha uses. It's called chitta. And chitta really is the emotion part of the mind, emotional mind. And the scientific term is affective process. Scientists usually refer to that as the affective process. This is when the mind responds to pleasant and unpleasant feelings. Right? So pleasant and unpleasant feelings arouse emotions, and this leads to this emotional excitement, and we begin to react as a result of that. And in the process of reacting, we personalize our experience. When we feel something, we say, I feel this. We never say, this is what it feels. I see the dog. I see you. We never say, these eyes see the dog. We personalize the body and the experience of the body and treat it like as though it is the self. So that's why we always personalize these experiences. So these are the three words. Unfortunately, when we read the translations, translated English text of all the sutras, almost all the translators never distinguish between these three. They never discern them, especially between mano and chitta. Whenever the term mano arises in the Pali version, the translator just uses the word mind. Whenever the word chitta arises, again he uses the word mind. So he doesn't differentiate. Are we talking about the thinking mind, or are we talking about the emotional mind? Be aware. There are two processes going on in your mind in addition to this process of perception. There is the emotional process and there is the intellectual process. Intellectual process is the conscious, rational thoughts that you have, the decisions you make. Emotional process is basically the part of the mind that is disturbing as a result of sensory experiences and begins to plant messages like, I like this, I don't like this, I want this, I don't want this. So emotional mind is really going for desires and hatreds, whereas the rational mind can discern what is good for us and what is not good for us. So we're going to explore these two in a moment. But unfortunately, if we read a lot of the English translations of sutras, they don't really differentiate between these two. But it is very, very important to differentiate, because Buddha uses these two words to mean slightly different aspects of our mind. So it's very important to differentiate that. And I'll show you a little bit about the differentiation later on. If we take a look at the brain, I'll keep it very simple. The brain evolved over millions of years into three main layers. We have the brain stem, which is our survival brain. Then in the middle part of the brain, there is this thing called the limbic system, the emotional part of our brain. This is the part of the brain that processes emotions, so to speak. To keep it very simple, I'll just describe it like that. And this is the part of the brain that causes the release of hormones. You see, it is actually the release of hormones in our body that causes us to feel in a certain way. And this kind of feeling is what we call emotion. So, limbic system is the part of the brain responsible for that kind of processing. Then on the outermost layer of the brain is the cerebral cortex. This is what is commonly called the thinking brain, or I prefer to call it the learning brain, because it can also remember and it can also recall. And therefore this cerebral cortex is really the rational, conscious thinking brain. So the brain itself made of these three parts, and there are two major streams of thoughts arising. The emotional thoughts, because of the disturbances of the limbic system, and the rational, conscious rational thoughts because of the activity of the cerebral cortex. So in fact, that is a very straightforward correlation. You could say this limbic system is responsible for affective process, the emotional process, and what the Buddha called chitta. And then the cerebral cortex is responsible for the cognitive process, the intellectual process, which the Buddha called mano. Right? So really it's the thinking brain and the process of the thinking mind, which is called mano. So now we have a basic differentiation between these two major terms, mano and chitta. let's take a look at the emotional brain. This is very important because there's a part of the emotional brain that is responsible for a lot of our suffering. So deep inside the part of the emotional brain, there is a small little structure. It's about the size of your nail, about a thumbnail. That's just a small little bit. There's one on each hemisphere. You see, we have two hemispheres. Our brain is made of two hemispheres. So there's one on each hemisphere. It's called the amygdala. Very important word, amygdala. Amygdala is responsible for a lot of things. Basically, the amygdala is evolved to protect us from harm. So what it does is it scans environmental activities. Every time we see, hear, smell, taste, or touch something, that signal goes through the amygdala first before it gets processed by the thinking brain. So the amygdala is aroused by everything that we see, hear, smell, taste, and touch, all our sensory inputs. And it is sensing for any potential threat or potential harm to help save our life, to help protect us from harm. For example, we're walking down the street, and through the corner of our eye, without seeing clearly, a fast approaching object coming towards us. Now we don't have a chance or don't have time to take a good look what it is. But what happens? Do we stand there, turn around, take a good look, and decide what to do before we jump out of the way? Very often the whole body jumps out of the way. That reaction is initiated by the amygdala. Because the amygdala is sensing for environmental inputs such as loud noise, bright light, fast approaching objects. All these are potential threats. Why loud noise is a potential threat? Going back hundreds of thousands of years, the ancient cavemen walking down the jungle path will hear a loud roar, and then the one who waited to see what comes out of the bush is not going to be alive. The one who turned around and ran, he's the one who stays alive. And then his next generation of children, he will teach his children. You hear the loud noise, run. So we train the brain to react to loud noise. Same thing with bright light, same thing with fast approaching object. So we learn how to do that. Right? The same thing when you see someone throwing a ball at you very quickly. Do you have time to figure out the direction of the ball, the movement of the ball, the speed of the ball, when it's going to hit your head, which part of the head it's going to hit before you try to block or catch the ball? You don't, you react. That reaction is the work of the amygdala, right, together with other parts of your brain. So that's what the amygdala does. Unfortunately, it also has another parallel role. So it has two paradoxical roles. The first one I have just described to you, it is your bodyguard, protects you. It senses for threats and harm and dangers and alerts you and causes the body to react. It doesn't just alert you, it causes the whole body to react. And unfortunately, it can also be easily aroused by false alarm. Like a friend. Let's say you're sitting there reading a book peacefully and somebody walks up from behind you without saying anything, suddenly touch you on the shoulder. What happens? You jump, you get spooked. That spook reaction is really the activity of the amygdala. And that can actually cause a lot of harmful effects in the body. And this harmful effects is called stress. That is really what is happening. We see something that may be threatening to our jobs, threatening to our lives, or threatening to our livelihood, threatening to our family. Then we get angry, we get fearful, we get anxious. All these emotional states are aroused because of the amygdala. The amygdala is the thing that started it. That is actually an emotional excitement. So we're going to talk a little bit about this emotional excitement. And it's very important, if you really want to understand properly what is emotional excitement, it is necessary to understand there is this thing called the amygdala, and it is causing that kind of excitement. So let's take a look at what kind of excitement we're talking about. The process of experience. Everything that is happening around us, the activities of the environment, they will stimulate our sense organs. Right? Light enter the eye, sounds entering the ear, and then we smell, we taste, and we touch. So the sense organ pick up these environmental stimulations, and then perception is formed in the mind. Oh, we see something. We have just seen something. We have just heard a sound. We have just smelled something, or we tasted something. So this perception arises in the mind. So that is the first part of the mental experience that the Buddha was talking about, vijnana. But then the next part of the mental process arises, called the cognitive process, or the mano. What does the mano try to do? The mano tries to interpret what has just been seen, heard, smelled, tasted, and touched. So it actually refers to memory. Whatever that has been perceived, it tries to match the categorized memory. What is this thing? And it never matches things exactly. It matches things according to categorization, categories. So basically it matches something similar. I'll give you an example. You would not have seen this bottle before because I just brought it just now. So what is this? Water, a bottle of water. Now, a bottle of water is not a specific thing. It is a generic thing. Categorized. Category of bottle, category of water, category of drinking water, and so on. Right? If you see me drink this, then you will categorize it as drinking water. So that is what we meant by categorization. We remember things according to categorization. Categories. We never remember things specifically what it is. We always remember things according to the category it falls into. Right? So that is really what happens. This process of interpretation is called papancha. And then it interprets it and gives it some label. Now, because of the way you interpret it, whatever you see, hear, smell, taste, and touch, it arouses the emotion. So it actually arouses the chitta, the affective process. And this is the beginning of the emotional process. When emotion is aroused, the first thing that happens is it triggers a biochemical reaction. It actually causes hormones to be released. Now, the reason why some of us don't realize it is either because this effect is very mild, or we may not be mindful about what's going on in our body. Right? For example, I say something like durian. Some of you may already getting this mouth-watering effect, right? All this is caused by these hormones being released. I say something like asam laksa. Some of you may feel sourness in your mouth. And for those of you who don't feel anything, I will describe to you. You remember when you went to primary school? In those days they don't use whiteboard and marker pen. What did they use? Chalk and blackboard. And then when the teacher writes on the blackboard with a brand new chalk, it makes a sound like squeak squeak, squeak squeak, squeak squeak. And then you get some kids, very naughty with long nails. They like to scratch the blackboard and it makes the sound. Now, how many of you are feeling a tingling sensation in your body right now? That tingling sensation you are feeling is hormones being released. Your brain has triggered, in fact the amygdala has triggered a chain reaction causing hormones to be released in your body, making you feel certain sensations. Right? So that kind of sensation is experienced as feelings. It can be pleasant, it can be unpleasant. And this is the beginning of emotion. And these sensations, right, these sensations is actually a kind of feeling. The Pali word for it is Vedana. It can be pleasant, it can be unpleasant, it can be neutral. But when there is a hormonal sensation, it is never neutral. It's always pleasant or unpleasant. It's only when you have no reaction to it, then it is neutral. So in this case, when there's hormones being released, then you will feel either pleasant or unpleasant. And this pleasant or unpleasant feeling comes back and disturbs the mind again. Now you get a second round of disturbance. The first round was you saw something and it causes the release of hormones. The second round is now you feel something and it causes more hormones to be released. It triggers more reaction in your chitta. That's really what is going on. Now, if you're not careful, if you allow this to go on, if you get carried away by sense pleasures, then this can go on and on and on and makes it worse. This is why some people enjoy certain things so much that they are so addicted to it, because they are addicted to that sensation, you see. So this is the first thing that is happening now, that bodily sensation. And this, up to this point, it is physiological. That means bodily, physical, physiological disturbance, commonly called stress. Or the common word for stress in Pali is dukkha. Of course, we translate dukkha as suffering, but if you look at dukkha more specifically, one of the meaning of dukkha is really stress, right? So this is the physical part, stress. And some people call it the fight or flight reaction. And this in fact corresponds to what the scientists today term as general adaptation syndrome, stage 1, because they're describing the whole stress reaction. There was a scientist who described stress reaction, describing it in 3 stages, and it corresponds exactly to the way the Buddha described it also. And so this is actually sokha and parideva, according to the Buddha. It's grief and lamentation. This is really the beginning of suffering. Sokha and parideva, those 2 Pali words, which is often translated as grief and lamentation. And this is stage 1, called the alarm reaction. It corresponds to stage 1 of this general adaptation syndrome. Now the scientist who described that, his name is Hans Selye. He's actually an endocrinologist. An endocrinologist is a scientist that works with body chemistry, your bodily fluids and your hormones. So the person who is an expert in your hormones is a medical doctor specializing in hormone reaction. So that is an endocrinologist. Hans Selye was an endocrinologist, and he described this stress reaction in 3 stages. He called it all the general adaptation syndrome. The first stage he described as alarm reaction. Basically, it causes bodily activity, like the physiological reaction in your body, which is what I just described. And then it leads to the next thing, which is a mental thing or a psychological thing. It causes you to realize or recognize it is a threat. And then you begin to recognize that you need to cope with it. So you begin to recognize efforts needed to cope with the threat. This is the psychological disturbance or psychological reaction, the second part. Now, when you try to cope with it, you either succeed or you fail. If you succeed, then it is stopped, right? The stress is stopped. If you fail, it leads to the third stage, which is a stage of exhaustion, meaning you give up. It's so painful that you couldn't take it anymore. In this case, it either drives the person to think in suicidal terms. And this is people who are very depressed, for instance, extremely depressed. They feel like they want to commit suicide. So that is the stage of exhaustion. The mind gives up. Or it may even cause the person to die, like having a heart attack, right? Cardiac arrest. That is the extreme case. So that is the stage of exhaustion, because we are not able to overcome the threat, and basically either the body gives up or the mind gives up. If the body gives up, the body gets a cardiac arrest and the body dies. The mind gives up, the person wants to commit suicide and he takes his own life, right? So it is these 3 stages. So let's take a look at the stage 1.
Fear is so important for our survival, we do something absolutely remarkable. Our bodies begin to react to a threat before we're even consciously aware of what the threat might be. Because when we're faced with danger, milliseconds count. At the first hint of danger, early warning signals are sent to the brain via the optic nerve, to our tiny and primitive fear center, the amygdala. This prepares our body for action. Next, nerve pulses are fired down the spinal cord to the adrenal glands near our kidneys. This triggers a release of adrenaline. Now we're on full alert. Adrenaline is the vital hormone that can flood our body in a split second. As it reaches our lungs, we breathe more deeply and take in more oxygen. It also makes our heart beat faster. Oxygen-rich blood is diverted to our muscles. They are now charged springs, waiting for the signal to run or fight. All this before our conscious mind has even registered a threat. This reaction to fear has evolved over millions of years and is known as the fight or flight response.
So these reactions are actually evolved over millions of years, and it's commonly called fight or flight reaction. What it means, actually, it's 3 stages: freeze, fight, or flight. Freeze, if it is something you have never seen before, you don't even know whether it is a threat or not a threat, so you freeze up, you know. Fight means it is something that causes you to want to challenge it, or it's anger, you want to fight against it, you want to get rid of it right away. Push it, punch it, kick it, or whatever. Flight means you run. It is something that threatens you and you know you can't overpower it, like a tiger coming towards you. Are you going to fight with the tiger or are you going to run? So you run. And those who run the fastest survive, and they give birth to the next generation. The one that runs the slowest, he dies. This is why it is evolved. You see, if 2 brothers walk down the jungle path, they hear a loud roar and they see the bush shaking. One brother turned around and ran. The other one wanted to see, what is this, you know? That one who wanted to see what is this got killed. The one who ran survived, and next generation, he teaches his kids. Now this time, he has two sons. The 2 sons walk down the jungle path. Then they hear the loud roar. Even before the bush starts to shake, one of the young sons turned around and ran. But the other one says, no, Daddy said, wait for the bush to shake. So he waited for the bush to shake, and then out comes the saber-toothed tiger, but he didn't run fast enough. You know, again, the one who ran faster, the one who reacted quicker to any threat, survived. And this is why we evolved this reaction. This reaction is evolved. It was not something originally in the brain of the human being. It is evolved. The original brain of the human being was pure and good, calm and peaceful. But all this conditioning caused the brain to carry this programming. And it is this programming that represents some of the defilements. Right? These are really defilements of sorts. Many of them are evolved because the original brain is pure and good. So what kind of body reaction? Basically, the amygdala is aroused and it triggers a chain reaction, sending messages to different glands. And one of the glands that receives a message is the adrenal gland. You see, we have 2 adrenal glands directly above the kidney. So we got 2 kidneys, one on each side. So directly above the kidney is the adrenal gland. And it releases 2 very powerful hormones, adrenaline followed by cortisol. And they get carried throughout the body through the bloodstream, right? Blood circulation system to various parts of the body. And various organs react to these hormones. When these hormones reach the heart, it causes the heart to beat faster. And this is to pump the blood faster through the rest of the body, because the body is under threat. So it begins to react. This is all evolved reaction. So it causes the blood to pump faster, and it does a few other things. It actually causes the blood pressure to rise. It actually causes your blood temperature to rise. And it also causes the breathing, respiration to deepen. You breathe faster too, more rapid breathing. Why? Because you want to take in more oxygen. Because oxygen is energy for the cells to react. Without oxygen, you will not be able to have enough energy in your cells and your muscles to react. So you breathe faster, breathe deeper. It suspends your intestinal system. It causes your muscles to all tense up. Right? So that's why muscles get tensed up. You see, when a person is aroused emotionally, He is tensed. You don't see people emotionally aroused and looking very relaxed. It doesn't happen. It's all tensed up. Whether it is fear, anxiety, shame, guilt, anger, hatred, any kind of this kind of emotions, the muscles are tensed up. And then it causes other things. Your hair to stand on end. The goosebumps you felt earlier on is actually a reaction of hair standing on ends. And your pupils dilate. That means it opens up so you can catch more light to be able to see more clearly. It causes your facial expression to distort. Again, if you think about it, a person who is either fearful, angry, anxious, anxiety, worried, facial expression is all tensed up, all distorted. You don't see people who are angry, fearful, worried, looking all the face very relaxed. No such thing. And it causes body temperature to rise. It causes other parts of the body reaction, trembling, perspiration, and so on. And then this one, you can see the example here. You can see hair standing on end at the back of this cat here, see? Right? Pupils dilate. Facial expression distorted. Muscles all tensed up in the arm, you see? Now we have to be careful because in the face, there are many very important regions of the face. If they get tensed too much, guess what will happen? You get railway tracks on your face. Yeah? And guys, don't laugh. Not only women get it, men too. They get all kinds of railway tracks on the face. You can tell, if a person, before the person is 70 years old, if the face is all wrinkly and dried skin and so on, that's because of a lot of hormonal reactions. It could be because, not necessarily always, but it could be because of a very emotionally charged life. A person who has undergone a very emotional life is very likely to have this kind of condition. A person who is very blessed with a sweet, happy, peaceful life most of the time, you can see they have very nice complexion on, natural one. So basically, this is really what happens to us. And then something else happens. Blood sugar level rises and body immune system is suspended. Now we look at all these things. Do these things look like they're very healthy or not? Very, very unhealthy. Immune system suspended. What happens? You can catch a disease very easily. Blood sugar level rises. What happens? You easily become diabetic. Perspiration, too much of perspiration, too much of body temperature rising. You get dehydration in your body. And facial expression distorted. Right? You get all kinds of wrinkles and railway tracks. Pupils dilate too much, too frequently. What happens? It weakens your eyesight. When you get old, your eyesight becomes very weak. Hair standing on end, sooner or later, nothing to stand on end anymore. And muscles all tensed up. This is why people need to go for that tuina and all this reflexology and massage, because the body is too tense. They need to do something to relax it. But actually those are not very good ways of relaxing. You can actually learn mindful relaxation exercises. There are many people teaching it. Some people are teaching it for free. I used to run these courses. I plan to run it again. Maybe later part of this year I'll run it again. Mindful relaxation exercises. One very famous personality that runs this is Dr. Pang Ching Ka. He runs Mindful Gym. So this is the kind of program you should attend. Learn how to relax. You don't have to go for the massage every week or 3 times a week and so on. Learn how to relax. And it's basically living in the moment and learning how to relax. I'm not going to touch on that, but that is a different topic. Can talk about it next time. Intestinal movement gets suspended. What happens? Then you get all kinds of ulcer condition, and it worsens your ulcer condition. Respiration deepens, and then you can go into some kind of breathing problem, asthmatic, hyperventilation, and so on. Heart beats faster, and blood pressure rises. What happens when blood pressure rises? You experience hypertension. Heart beating faster. Now, if your heart beats too fast, too frequently, what happens? Scientists have basically, by consensus, have agreed. A heart is just a pump. It has a lifespan. It can only beat so many billions of times in a lifetime. If it beats faster, more frequently, what happens? Your life is shorter. That's what it is. So basically, these are very unhealthy reactions in the body. So learn to tame your emotions so you don't get so reactive. Your body does not react to emotional arousal so easily. This kind of arousal gives rise to emotional excitement, and this emotional excitement can actually drive you to behave in very unwholesome ways. To either get rid of that excitement, or if that excitement is exhilarating. You know, some excitement can be very exhilarating. People who like very spicy food, when they eat something spicy, they enjoy it so much. So that is getting addicted to sensual pleasures. It can cause you to react in such an unwholesome way. You want more of the sensual pleasures, right? A person who loves chili, when he eats something spicy, he will want more. A person who hates chili, when he eats something spicy, he feels angry and hateful towards what he has just eaten. So these are all kinds of reactions. So learn to tame your emotions, and you can reduce the impact of this kind of emotional excitement, right? Stressful conditions in your body. Let's go on a little bit more. First, we talked about this physiological change in the body, and you begin to feel these bodily sensations, tensions in the body. These tensions in the body, dukkha or stress, disturbs the mind. Now, when the mind gets disturbed, the chitta is aroused and it begins to recall the past, it begins to imagine the future, it begins to try to change the present, right? Because all this is happening because emotions is not just talking about one thing. Emotion is made of two dimensions. First is what I have described, the physiological dimension. The second is a psychological dimension, which is the mental part of emotion. Now, realize now also what Hans Selye has described as the general adaptation syndrome. Emotion began as a physiological disturbance. A lot of people don't realize that, but now scientists have come to a consensus. That is what emotion is. It began as a physiological change in the body, and then followed by a psychological disturbance. And in each of these disturbances, there are two activities: arousal and reaction. So when the hormones arouse various organs in the body, then we begin to feel certain sensations. Some of these sensations are very dreadful, very painful. But some of these sensations, especially when you are doing something you enjoy, some of these sensations can be very exhilarating, or what they call very shock. So it is both, right? And you begin to react. So that's the physical part, the mental part. This physical part disturbs the mind and actually causes the next one, which is the mental part. The disturbance arouses memory, imagination, expectation. Memory tries to recall the past. Have I experienced this before? Oh, last time I did this was so enjoyable. Now I want more of it, Or imagining the future. Oh, I'm enjoying this. I'm going to get more. I want this to go on and on and on, Or if it is something you don't like, then you remember the past. Oh, this was something very dreadful, very painful. I hate it. And then you begin to feel sorrowful. Or you start to imagine, oh, this is going to disturb me for the rest of my life. I want it to stop. I want to get rid of it. This wanting more of something pleasurable, or wanting to get rid of something unpleasant, that is lobha and dosa. And clinging on to it, every experience, I am experiencing this delusion, there is the self that is experiencing it, that is moha. So lobha, dosa and moha, they arise from memory, imagination, expectations, because the emotional mind chitta was disturbed by feelings. The feeling of the bodily sensations, whether the feeling is pleasant or unpleasant. And that is really what is happening. And then it begins to react. When you begin to react, the reaction is tanha. Tanha means it is something pleasurable, you want more of it, you react in that way. If it is something unpleasant, you want to get rid of it. If you can't get rid of it, you hate it, right? Aversion turns into hatred, right? Just as lust turns into greed. So now the emotional mind disturbs the thinking mind, and when that happens, you can't think clearly. When the emotional mind is aroused, it disturbs the thinking mind, and this disturbance is a kind of a tug of war, right? And this mental disturbance or emotional excitement that is disturbing the mind, this is called distress, or the Buddha used the word domanassa. This in fact corresponds to stage 2 of the general adaptation syndrome. The Buddha described this physical hormonal change. You see, at the time of the Buddha, people did not understand what is hormones. People did not understand these terms, what is a hormone, they don't know. So the Buddha used a word that was translated as fever. So when Buddha, in the sutras, Buddha was saying you have a fever for sensual pleasures, or you have a fever against something hateful, he's actually talking about this hormonal change in the body. He used two words: fever to refer to the physiological disturbance, vexation to refer to the mental disturbance, the distress or domanassa. Right? Domanassa is basically the condition of what has happened, whereas the vexation is actually the way it was happening, that the mind was disturbed. So fever and vexation, you'll find this in a lot of translations in many sutras. Wherever this time when you read any sutra and you come across the word fever and vexation, realize this is really what the Buddha was talking about. He was talking about the physiological change in the body as well as the psychological arousal and reaction. And this emotional mind disturbing the thinking mind, that means the feeling disturbing the thinking, is a tug of war going on. And in fact we think, oh, this only happens when I get emotional. No, it is happening continuously every moment of your life. If you are not mindful, if you are not careful with the way you are thinking, the moment you interpret something, it's already there. It causes this tug of war going on, and we are using that all the time to make decisions. That means when we come across something and then we have to make a decision what to do, 99.9% of the time, which one wins? Emotion wins or logical thinking wins? Emotion. Now, this tug of war, the emotional brain is very powerful. It disturbs the thinking brain, that you can't think rationally. But don't get too worried about it. I'll show you why. The scientists have an explanation. Before I do that, I'll just quickly describe. This is actually stage 2 of general adaptation syndrome, according to the scientists. It is called the stage of resistance, and the Buddha called this dukkha domanassa. So now you have those 4 parts of suffering. Suffering was described in 5 words, right? Soka, parideva, dukkha, domanassa, and the last one, upayasa. I'll come to upayasa later. So earlier on we had soka and parideva, grief and lamentation. Now we have dukkha and domanassa, stress and distress. Or one is a physical part, the other one is a mental part. So this tug of war going on, it is called cognitive dissonance. In fact, this is the perfect translation of the word vicikiccha. A lot of people thought the word vicikiccha meant doubt. Actually, it is not doubt. It leads to doubt. But what it is cognitive dissonance. What is cognitive dissonance? It is actually the mind being pulled in opposite directions. On one side, you have feelings, emotions, affective process pulling in one direction. On the other end, you have reasoning, in intellect, and thinking pulling in the other direction. So you have feeling and thinking pulling in opposite direction. So your mind is being torn. Dissonance means being stretched in 2 different directions. So your mind is being pulled in 2 different directions, but most of the time it will go towards the direction of the emotions. So this is what is happening when feeling and reasoning pull in opposite directions, and we experience this cognitive dissonance, Vicikiccha, we invariably react according to feeling. We don't react according to thinking. We react according to feeling, and then we use our intelligence to justify why we react according to feeling. You see, human beings are like that. We make decisions using our emotions, and then we use our intelligence to justify that decision. That's what we do all the time. We use our emotion to make decisions, and then we are very clever. We use our intelligence to justify why we decided this way or that way. Simple example, you buy a cell phone. You buy a mobile phone. If you want to buy a mobile phone based purely, and I mean purely on reasoning and intellectual, rational thinking, what should you do? You have a budget. Let's say the budget 900 ringgit or whatever. Then you go out to all the shops and you find out all the different models that fit in your budget. And then you look at the specification of each and every single model of these cell phones. And then you compare feature by feature, line by line, and then maybe you give some scoring system, and then you determine, this model is the best value for money and I will buy this phone. Was that how you decided on buying a phone? Yes. No. The yes is the intellect trying to cover up the emotions. Yeah. Because for any budget you have, there are at least 20 models. So if you're not comparing 20 models, then you didn't use that process. You might be comparing 2. But you already made an emotional decision. You like those 2. Now you just want to see which of these 2 you're going to buy. See, you already made an emotional decision. You already decided it is that particular model. Now you want to compare. You heard people say Xiaomi is very good, so you chose a Xiaomi model. Then you said, Samsung is very stable, so you chose a Samsung that fits the budget. Now you compare these 2 and then you pick one. But you already made an emotional decision in the beginning. Then after that you go around telling people, I compare feature ma, I use my intelligence ma. That is justification. Yeah. That is really what's happening. But don't knock yourself so hard on it. There's a reason why we do that. Because the way our brain has evolved. So let's listen to what the scientists have to say. Because of the way our brain has evolved, why are we more emotional? Alright? Let's take a look.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, time!
And when we try to control them, we start a tug of war between our brain's oldest and newest parts. While ancient structures like the amygdala respond to threats by trying to turn our anger or fear on, it's newer structures, such as the prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of our brain, that try to turn them off. It's the tug of war between these 2 systems that gives rise to our emotions. At New York University, neuroscientist Joseph Ledoux has studied how the amygdala and the cortex shape our emotional responses. You know more about the amygdala than anybody alive, and you still can't control yours.
No.
Why?
Now, there's an interesting thing, again, that has to do with the wiring of the brain. This is, if we could just look at it here. So this is the human brain inside a skull. And the prefrontal cortex is here in the front, right behind your forehead. And that is the newest part of the brain. This is where we make our decisions. This is where we plan for the future and strategize. The lateral prefrontal cortex has no connectivity with the amygdala. The amygdala has superhighways to talk to the cortex, but the prefrontal cortex has only back roads and side streets to get to the amygdala. And therefore, it is unable to tell the amygdala, cool it.
But why are there no connections?
We're in the process of evolving as we speak, and those connections have not been put in yet. This thing was built to do fancy things cognitively, not necessarily to control our emotions.
You see, our brain is evolved basically to think and to do fancy things. The thinking part is not evolved to try to control the emotions. And you have heard what the scientists have said. The amygdala has very strong connections going to the thinking brain. The thinking brain is up in the front here. And the thinking brain has very weak connections going back to the amygdala. That means when the amygdala is aroused, It is sending a lot of sabotaging signals going to the front, disturbing your rational thinking. Therefore, you are not able to think rationally because these emotional thoughts keep disturbing your rational thinking. At the same time, even if you try, right, for most of us when we try, the thinking brain does not have enough connections going back to the emotional brain. Therefore, it's very difficult to calm the emotion purely by thinking alone. Not so easy. Think about it. Can you calm your emotion by purely thinking alone? It's not so easy. You need to do something else. I'll explain to you what you can do. Very simple later on. Yeah. So that is really what's happening. The emotional brain has such strong connections, it is continuously sabotaging the thinking brain. And it's because of this that the Buddha now pointed out in this sutra in Samyutta Nikaya. Emotions dominate the world. Emotions create distress. Emotion is that one thing to which all are spellbound. That means emotion basically is controlling everything that's going on, decisions that are being made around the world. Right? Why would some people want to cheat in a corporate world and run away with 2.6 billion ringgit, that kind of thing, right? And emotions create distress. So it actually creates a lot of psychological disturbances. And emotion is something all of us somehow are clinging on to it. We are spellbound to it. We are under the spell of emotions. We can never think in a rational way easily and say, this is not good, we should not do that. We don't do that. Most of the time we just react to emotion. That's why Buddha's teaching throughout many sutras teaches us not to react to sensual pleasures. Learn to calm ourselves from sensual pleasures. Because if we don't do that, what happens? A human beings, we are the only species of animal that regrets the past, fearful of the future, and never satisfied with the present moment. Humans do that. Animals don't do that. You think about it. Right? If you, let's say, I hope it is not happening to anyone, but I'm just describing a hypothetical scenario. You have an elderly person staying at home depending on you. She can't cook for herself. So every morning you cook something, prepare for her, and then she can eat it for lunch and eat it for dinner, and you come home at night, you may prepare something special after that. Every morning you do that before you go to work. At the same time, you have a dog. You also put out the food on the tray for the dog, and then you leave it there and you come back in the evening. One morning, before you have a chance to cook, you get a phone call from the office. Some urgent thing has just cropped up, emergency. Please come to the office right away, take care of it immediately. Then you thought, it might take me a couple of hours, I'll come back during lunchtime and cook. So you ran to the office. But then it was such a major thing, you got caught there the whole day. So you didn't come back during the day. You came back late at night. Wow, you didn't cook for the old lady. You didn't put food out for the dog. Now, what kind of reaction would you get from the old lady when you come home? Would you see her smiling at you and say, oh, welcome home? Or would you see an angry face or unhappy face, growling face, or some kind of dissatisfied face? May even be saying some nasty things to you. A, happy face. B, unhappy face. Which one? B. So humans don't live in the moment. And what is happening in the moment? You came home. Now, your dog. Do you think your dog is going to bark at you and growl at you when you come home? Or your dog is going to wag the tail so happy that you are home? A or B? Yeah, the dog is going to be happy wagging the tail to welcome you home. Why? Because the dog is living in the moment. What is happening in the moment? You are home. Not about the past, which is you forgot to feed the dog. Yeah? So think about that. Humans, they are so regretful of past, fearful of future, and unhappy with the present moment. Right? So we have to be very careful. We allow our emotions to dominate. All this is because of memory arising, imagination arising, expectation arising. These are the three very harmful conditions going on in our mind. Imagination, memory, expectation. I-M-E. I call this the I, me syndrome. I, me syndrome. Everything is about me, very self-centered. Yeah? The I, me syndrome. Imagination, memory, expectation. That is what's going on all the time. Imagination, memory, expectation. The I, me syndrome. So we have to watch our imagination. We have to watch our memory. We have to watch our expectations when they are aroused. We have to be careful about them. Because if we are not, and this is very classic, people have a hard time letting go of their suffering. Out of a fear of the unknown, they prefer suffering that is familiar. And that is happening to a lot of people. Yeah? We prefer to suffer. The devil we know is better than the one we don't. So that is a common phrase. So we prefer to hang on to the same suffering over and over, instead of going into some new avenues, new opportunities to change the whole situation. And that's what's happening, and that's because of this process called upadana. Clinging, some call it clinging, attachment, basically hanging on, can't let go. Got to learn to let go. If you can't let go, it can lead you to extreme condition, and this is an extreme condition. It is called amygdala hijack. It means your amygdala is continuously aroused. Right? Here is an extreme example here. The scientists are describing the extreme example of amygdala hijack. So let's take a look at this.
At Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston, scientists are examining the fear response, scanning the brains of people with and without post-traumatic stress disorder, as a series of expressionless faces are flashed in front of them. Hidden among the faces is a single image that signifies threat. A face frozen in terror. In that instant, one part of the brain in every test subject is highly responsive. The amygdala.
The amygdala is a small structure which cares a lot about threat and fear. If there's something that may be potentially harmful to us, it is a brain area which gets activated very quickly and recruits other areas of the brain to try to deal with this unexpected circumstance.
The amygdala sends outputs to the body so that your muscles begin to tense, hormones are released, blood pressure goes up, and all of these are part of the protective response of the body designed by evolution to help you stay alive. Imagine you're walking down a path in the woods and all of a sudden there's a curved object that looks like a snake on the ground. And you find yourself stopping with your leg resting above that object, and you look down and see that it's simply a stick. So why did your leg stop like that?
In the normal brain, the amygdala acts like an early warning system, alerting us to danger. But the amygdala does not act on its own. The frontal cortex, where we think and reason, plays a crucial role.
There are two parallel routes of fear processing in the brain. One will go directly to the amygdala. It's a quick and dirty pathway and trigger a fear reaction unconsciously. But then as the information slowly makes its way to the cortex perceives the difference between the stick and the snake and says it's only a stick.
Once the discerning cortex has determined that there is no call for panic, it sends a message to the amygdala, quieting the fear response. But in post-traumatic stress disorder, the cortex is held hostage by a volatile amygdala. Thinking is hijacked by emotion.
People with PTSD are very sensitively tuned to pick up threat and respond to even very minor stimuli as if their life were in danger.
We have to be very careful that how we react to all these threats. Now I'm going to explain to you this thing called the vicious cycle chain reaction. That means if we are not mindful and careful about what we're experiencing, and we just allow these emotions to take us away, this is what can happen. Whatever that we experience, everything we see, hear, smell, taste and touch, triggers this biochemical chain reaction, and then we begin to feel something. And then the emotion is aroused further, and there is a psychological arousal and reaction. Now, this psychological arousal and reaction actually triggers more release of hormones. Now, if we are not careful, this continuous release of hormone goes on and on and on. And when it goes on and on and on, this is what is called post-traumatic stress disorder. That means we are not able to stop it. It just continuously causing the whole body to react, and then people might die from heart attack, because this could lead to a cardiac arrest. It could lead to physical conditions. This is why you see some people who are not able to control their emotions. When they get emotional, their whole body is completely in a very unreasonable way, behaving in a very unwholesome, unreasonable way. And this is really what's going on. This condition is very dangerous. It can actually lead to very severe depression. People who are experiencing severe depression is because they are experiencing this condition. And this condition, the scientists call the amygdala hijack, where the amygdala is controlling everything that's going on now, completely aroused, causing all these things, all these bodily changes. And this in fact corresponds to stage 3 of the general adaptation syndrome, exhaustion. And the Buddha calls it upayasa. So these are the 5 words to describe suffering: Soka parideva, dukkha domanassa, and upayasa. So basically this is a condition of upayasa. How can we overcome this? Right? Now, very fortunately, Daniel Goleman, a very famous psychologist, counseling psychologist, he wrote a book on emotional intelligence, and he has offered some explanations here. Let's take a look at what he has to say.
Stress isn't really so much in the things that happen in your life. It's really in how we react to them. And we can do something about those reactions. There are 3 windows of opportunity when it comes to handling the stress in our lives. The first is to do something to change things for the better. You know, whatever's the cause of the stress, if you can change it, do it. The second is in how you see it, changing the way you perceive what's happening. I once heard a wonderful line from a television preacher. It goes like this: something good is going to happen to you today. I love that line. That is so great. You don't know what it is. It's a wonderful thought, because it allows the possibility that what may seem so bad at first has an upside, that there's a silver lining to that cloud, right? Now, if we can't change the things that are happening to us, and we can't change how we see it, then we're left with a third opportunity, and that's handling the way our body and our mind react to these things. See, when the body is stressed, the emotional centers flood the body with stress hormones. And this makes it do things like shunt blood from the arms and the legs into the organs. It's a fight or flight response. It pumps up our blood pressure, speeds up our heartbeat. It steals energy, actually, from the immune system, it turns out, to get us ready for an emergency. It's what's called the fight or flight response. You've heard about that. Now, if that response gets triggered day after day, week after week, and month after month, over years, what happens is the biological system in our body that's most susceptible genetically, that's most reactive, is going to start to develop a stress-caused disease. You know, if you're a cardiovascular reactor, you're going to get high blood pressure. If you react in your gut, you're going to get problems there, and so on throughout the body. That's how stress over years and years leads to disease. It speeds up the process of coming down with the disease. So constant stress, it's like getting your amygdala stuck in high gear. Continual hijacks. We need to calm down. That's where relaxation comes in.
So we need to learn to calm down. And all we need to do is learn how to relax. And the way to gain freedom from these stressful tensions is first to relax the body. When something happens and it makes you all stressed up and you realize that, oh, now your heart is beating faster, you're breathing deeper, and then your muscles are all tense, your facial expressions is all tensed up, just relax, learn to relax. Right? Consciously relax. That's why it's called conscious relaxation. Train your mind to say, okay, I'm not going to do anything now, I just want to take a deep breath. So one of the best ways is deep breathing. One of the best ways. When you do that, biochemical activities in the body gradually subside. That means all the hormones that has been released, slowly it will die down, it will subside. Because you're not reacting to the hormone, you're not causing more hormones to be released. And that way the body tension drops, right? The body eases, no longer experiencing the tension from these hormones. And the mind is no longer disturbed by tensions in the body. And that is very important, because this relaxed body is a necessary condition for a calm mind. Before you can calm your mind, you must relax your body. Some people say, some people try to do it the other way around. It says, oh, when I get all aroused, I just have to train my mind, calm my mind, and then I can relax the body. Which is easier? Relax the body first or calm the mind first? Relax the body, because relaxing simply what? Do nothing. So that is what you should do. Nothing. Don't react. Just take a deep breath and relax. That's why you see some people say, oh, just relax. Or some people say, oh, take a deep breath. It works. That's what it is. And when you've done that, then only you allow your mind to calm down with introspective attention. Pay attention to what goes on inside, not what goes on outside. Introspective, turning inwards. The relaxed body is a necessary condition, because that suggests an absence of threats. The amygdala is no longer aroused. And consciously focus on what is the right thing, the good thing I can do now to make this situation better for me or for the person I'm working with. And when you start to do that, there is no emotional excitement. The mind calms down. And finally, there is no further arousal of biochemical chain reaction. This is the way you can tame your emotion. Learn to pause, relax, then think in a calm way. Right? Not allow your emotion to carry your thinking away. The first part, when you pause and relax, what are you doing? You're breaking this biochemical reaction. You're no longer causing a continuous flow of hormones. You're stopping it. By simply relaxing, it stops the flow of hormones. And avoiding memory, imagination, and so on running away. So what Daniel Goleman mentioned, right, by remaining calm and relaxed, we have 3 windows of opportunity. The first thing to do, think about what is it we can do to change the situation. If we can do something to change the situation, to make us feel better, then do it. It's good. Right? But there are some extremes. Don't think of like you are arguing or fighting with someone. Changing the situation means you could kill that person. Yeah? So not that kind of changing situation. Right? So a wholesome way of changing a situation. Now, not all problems can be solved like that. Not all problems can be solved by you changing the situation, because sometimes you are not in control of it. You may be in control with certain things, like for example, you're working for a company. That company doesn't pay you well. The company has the bosses which are very nasty, always very abusive. What can you do to change the situation? Change job. Don't kill the boss. The other thing to change the situation is to kill the boss. No. Change job. Yeah, that is what we meant by changing situation. But sometimes you can't change the situation. You are at home. Maybe it's your parents, or maybe it's your children giving you trouble all the time. So what can you do? kick them out of the house? So you can't always change the situation. When you can't change situation like that, the next thing is available to you. Change the way you perceive your situation. Change the way you interpret your circumstances. Right? Just like in my case, some people come to, and they see me, they haven't seen me for a long time, for many years, then they run into me and then they say to me, Billy, you're getting fatter. You know? Now if I perceive him to be trying to irritate me, then I get irritated, you see. But if I change the way I perceive it, if I'm thinking, oh, he's such a kind friend, he's thinking about my health, he's so concerned about my health, so the next time somebody comes along and says, Billy, you're getting fatter, I should say, oh, thank you very much, you are so kind, you know. This is what you should do. If somebody says to you, your dress doesn't look nice, don't get angry. Don't say, oh, you think I choose the wrong dress? No, your friend is telling you your dress doesn't look nice because your friend wants you to look nice. So thank your friend. Oh, thank you so much for criticizing my dress. But can we do that? So that is changing the way we perceive the circumstances, right? Not every negative word spoken to us is intended to harm or hurt us. Sometimes it is spoken out of kindness. Sometimes it's spoken out of concern. Maybe not tactfully, but it is still out of kindness and concern. Now, the last thing you can do, if you still can't do that, then perhaps the last thing you can do is change the way you respond to the situation. Instead of fighting back, right? Like in the case of a nasty boss who never appreciates you. Every time you do something right, he says, every time you do something wrong, he shouts at you and screams at you. You know, there's a few ways you can change the way you respond. Funny thing is, when people get upset and you respond to them with kindness, chances are they calm down very fast. So when somebody is upset with you or somebody never appreciates you, you just show kindness to that person and talk to that person in a kind way, and the person will start to wonder, you know, I shout at him, I scold him, he still don't get angry. Maybe no point shouting at him and scolding him anymore lah. See? That's one way of doing it. Yeah. So these are three wonderful ways taught by Daniel Goleman. Very important to remember this. Right? A very famous psychologist and philosopher said that, William James. The greatest weapon against stress is our ability to choose one thought over another. Choose the way you think. Choose to think in a wholesome, happy, peaceful way. And then you will find happiness, peace, and harmony, right, in your environment. So, to reduce stress, first pause. Right? Every time something stresses you, don't react right away, just pause. Because when you pause, you allow time for your emotional excitement to calm down. And you allow time for your bodily biochemical reaction to subside. And then, take a deep breath, relax. Take a deep breath. Before you do anything, just give it a little bit more time. Take a deep breath, relax, and consciously compose the mind to respond, not react. React is without thinking, reacting like animals. Respond is to think clearly, what is the good thing I can do now? How can I say something or do something to improve the situation? And then think what is the right thing to do, what is a smart thing to do. Purposefully focus on wholesome and beneficial response to the problem, whatever the problem is. And this is either changing the situation, or changing the way you interpret the situation, or changing the way you respond to the people in the situation, as Daniel Goleman has described. But think in itself is also an acronym. I'll show you later on what it means. Think, T-H-I-N-K. So before you speak or you act, ask yourself, is what you're going to say truthful? T for truthful. H, is it helpful? I, is it going to improve the situation? N, is it really necessary? Because sometimes banyak cakap banyak salah. So it may not be necessary, even if it's the truth. You don't have to say it. You know I'm getting fatter. You don't have to tell me all the time. Yeah, simple as that. Yeah, and is it kind? Yeah, this is the most important thing. Is this a kind act or speech you're about to take? Yeah. So THINK. Truthful, helpful, improving, necessary, and kind. Right? Simple acronym you can use. If you don't do that, you're behaving like animals. This is an ancient Sanskrit shloka that was used in India before the time of the Buddha. It was used to teach children not to behave like animals. It says that taking food, sleeping, avoiding dangers, sexual activities, these acts are common between animals and human beings. However, the ability to think is what makes humans different. Without thinking, humans are just like animals. This is why humans are called Manusya in Pali or Sanskrit. Manusya. Even in Bahasa Malaysia, Manusia. Because many Bahasa Malaysia words came from Sanskrit. Why is it called Manusya? Because it came from the word Mano, thinking. Mano, not Chitasya. Manusya. Animals are Chitasya. Human beings are Manusya because it came from the word Mano, thinking. Right? Very important. Choose your thoughts. Choose your conscious, rational thoughts. Not let unconscious, emotional thoughts rule you. Yeah? Between stimulus and response, there is a space. That means between something that stimulates you, angers you, or triggers your emotions, from the time it triggers your emotions to the time you should take action, there is a space. There is a moment. And in that space lies your freedom and your power to choose your response. In those choices you make lies your growth and your happiness. So in other words, whether you are happy with life or you are unhappy with life, it has to do with your decision. How is it you're going to react to something that arouses your emotion? Your choice in life. What you choose to think, how you choose to react. And this is spoken by a famous psychologist, Viktor Frankl. He is a survivor of Auschwitz in the German concentration camp. He survived it and he wrote a book, wonderful book, you should read it, Man's Search for Meaning. Right? So basically that is a very simple little lesson we can learn from that. So concluding what we have seen today, we have explored the teachings of the Buddha from a scientific perspective, how emotions are aroused, physiological as well as psychologically, and stress and suffering arise from our reactions to emotional excitements. So we're going to learn to pause, relax, and think. And by doing so, we cultivate wellness and peace of mind by choosing rational and wholesome thoughts. Because the Buddha has taught us to abandon the evil ways, abandon all forms of evil, to do good, enter the good life, to live a good life, and then in the process learn meditation to purify the mind. And this is the teaching of all the Buddhas. Every Buddha, including the Buddhas before Gautama Buddha, spoke the same thing. Because there are several sutras where the Buddha, Gautama Buddha, was talking about the past Buddha that he had come across, and they were teaching also the same thing. Because if we can do that, when we are faced with all the changing conditions in life, anicca we call it, faced with changing vicissitudes of life, everything is disturbing us, affecting us. If we can keep the mind undisturbed, that means we calm the emotion and we think rationally, we free ourselves from this emotional excitement, worry, lust, fear, and so on. This is the supreme bliss. And this is in the Mangala Sutta. And with that I conclude my presentation. Alright. So